Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Taking a break from current events this week, it's a timeless show. Learn how to invest in a durable asset that's not dependent on a rent check from your tenant. We're talking about investing in timber and a particular type that's had an enduring value for centuries that can offer some pretty excellent returns today on Get Rich Education. Finally, with Total Control Financial, get checkbook control of your existing 401k and IRA funds to invest in real estate. Yes, you can move your retirement money into your own checking account, but you must avoid the little-known tax that you'll get hammered with in a self-directed IRA. Instead, start your QRP. Learn more and get your free copy of the QRP book by text messaging QRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Kerala, India to Carrollton, Texas, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. We're talking about something that the ultra-wealthy invest in and that some of America's more prestigious universities' endowment funds invest in, and we're bringing it to a level where virtually anyone can participate in it. We're talking about prospering with timber. Yes, we're leaving current events this week. Next week here on the show, the CEO and chief economist of America's oldest investment and consulting firm is going to be here with us to talk about the state of the economy today and our economic future. That's going to be a great chat. Over time here, we've mostly discussed residential real estate on the show. At times, we've also discussed the opportunity with other things, like being on the debt side of a commercial property rather than the equity side of residential. Also, assisted living homes, as we've had Gene Garino here 3 times. And pretty steadily, we've discussed the growing of agricultural crops here over the years and how you can participate in that, namely coffee, cacao, and what we're discussing today with timber. We're talking about teak wood today, T-E-A-K. You've probably heard of teak before, and it really has some special physical attributes that make it so valuable, and we're going to discuss that today. Now, understanding the economics behind any investment is immersing yourself at least somewhat in understanding supply versus demand. Teak's demand has been sustained for centuries. It is used in flooring and countertops and furniture and boat building and as a veneer and elsewhere. In fact, teak has been used in boat building for more than 2,000 years. And then on the supply side, understand that trees are being harvested at about 10 times its replanting rate. Yes, teak trees are being knocked down 8 to 12 times faster than they're being replanted. That's a deeply negative supply. Now, in residential real estate, you often measure how much property you own or control by the number of doors you control, or perhaps the square footage of a property that you own. In timber vernacular, it's measured by the board foot. The board foot is simply a common unit of volume for timber. Now, I first learned that term in my life when I spent one summer of my youth doing forestry work, timber marking specifically, where I grew up in upstate Pennsylvania. In fact, the valuable tree of northwestern Pennsylvania is the black cherry tree with a high price per board foot. In fact, many people in northwestern Pennsylvania will tell you that the region grows the best black cherry tree in the world there in that climate that's right for it. It's a temperate climate tree. Teak trees are a tropical variety indigenous to Southeast Asia and India, and for a long time now, plantation teak has thrived in Latin America. Now, I've got to tell you that owning legacy teak is not the vehicle for you if you want to be financially free, say 2 years from now. Plantation teak is often harvested when it's 25 years of age. But as you'll see today, you don't have to wait 25 years to profit when there are available teak plantations that are already 20 to 21 years old. You'll learn about where those are today. I had a great chance to meet and befriend a Teak provider years ago. We've stayed in touch since and have caught up with each other at a few real estate conferences in the meantime as well. She's an American that relocated to Latin America years ago. She's based in Belize. The Teak plantations are in Panama and Nicaragua. Let's catch up with her. This week's guest has been with ECI Development's Teak Hardwoods team since 2012, and I first met her at a real estate conference in 2016. In fact, that's a real estate conference you've probably heard of because it's pretty well renowned. That's the Real Estate Guys Investor Summit at Sea. In fact, she is often on the road. She educates international audiences about markets and opportunities. It's been just over 2 years since she was last here with us on episode 170. Welcome back to Get Rich Education, Rachel Jensen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for a great introduction, Keith. I'm really excited to be here. I know last time we had really great response from your listeners, had some really great conversations, and I'm excited to meet a handful more of you. So thank you again for bringing me back on.
Yeah, interestingly, we talk about residential real estate more than anything else, where our listeners are investors, where they kind of often ask themselves these questions at the end of the month, like, well, did all of the tenants pay rent on time? And did I have very few maintenance issues? In order to have a strong cash flowing month, oftentimes we think in terms of the month here, but we're talking about something like timber investing. I know you've described it as generational wealth stewardship. Tell us about that.
Yes, exactly. And during this session, I really challenge you and your listeners to think differently because as real estate investors, and I understand because I'm a real estate investor as well, we tend to think about cash flow on a monthly basis, or if you have vacation rental on a nightly basis. So it's a little bit more difficult to think on a long-term scale. And you're exactly right, Keith. Timber, especially hardwoods, has a really long harvest cycle. So what that generally means is you have to wait years sometimes before you start to see anything come back to you. But this is not a new model for investing. The ultra wealthy, the top 1% of the top 1% have for years and for generations invested in timber because when they're building their portfolio, they're looking for diversification. And you've all heard this before, don't keep all your eggs in one basket. And I'm not just talking about diversification of asset classes, but also diversification of timelines for when those investments mature. And for a lot of the ultra wealthy, what they're trying to do is keep this wealth that they've built and protect it. And how they're protecting it is by investing it in something secure like the timber market. It has its harvest cycles. It stays in the family for generations. Once you harvest, you replant and you do it again. Harvest, replant, and you do it again. So it's very, very different from the traditional real estate model that many of us are used to and that many of us like because we know that we're going to be getting a check each month for X amount of dollars from tenant XYZ. But this is going to be a little bit different. And like I mentioned before, I really challenge you to think outside of the box, to think about diversifying that portfolio from the timeline perspective, because we want to have that cash flow right away, but we also want to be building our portfolio to last for a long, long, long time, whatever long means to you. But being able to incorporate these different methods and these different strategies that the ultra wealthy have used to our own portfolio is really, really important. And one more point that I'm going to make, and then we can really jump into it, is that the ultra wealthy have timber in their portfolio, and really it's been the ultra wealthy for a really long time, is because they're able to put a significant amount of money into purchasing land, into investing in the timber market. They're buying thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland, whereas a lot of us as an average investor, and what I mean by average investor is someone who doesn't really have $200, $300 million to invest in one big project, is we've just been kind of kicked out of the market because we didn't necessarily have those sort of resources. So we've opened up our farms, our Teak farms specifically, for real estate investors and investors generally who want to get in on this generational wealth stewardship opportunity, but just don't have those sort of huge resources that the ultra wealthy have.
That's right. We talk about time horizons and the long view. To a lot of residential real estate investors, it might be something like, well, I'm going to hold on to this rental single family home and sell it after 8 years, or maybe 1031 exchange it from a single family home up to a fourplex. But when we think about the long view, we can invest in something that both benefits you and it has such a long-term time horizon that at the same time, it can benefit your children and grandchildren.
Exactly. And, I get this all the time is, well, I'm too old for this, or I'm too young and I don't have any family yet. But the reality is, if you're able to really just see past that near future and think for the long term, then you're going to be positioning yourself in a much better case, in a much better situation. And teak, I don't know if anybody knows this, but teak is a 25-year harvest cycle, 2-5. It takes 25 years from the time that you plant the sapling to the point that you're harvesting it and bringing it to the marketplace. Now, we have various farms at different ages, and from newborns to 14-year-old teak to 20-year-old teak. So it gives people options. It gives them opportunities depending on what their timelines look like. I think our youngest investor, the time that he invested, was 21 years old. And our oldest at the time that he invested was 93 years old. And they both more or less did it for the same reasons. It was that generational wealth stewardship. And our 21-year-old, not married, doesn't have any kids, but he saw it from the perspective of, well, I have this extra cash, not much. He had $7,000, $8,000 right now, going to put it towards parcel. Then I'll have 3 harvests, maybe 3, it depends how healthcare is. You could have 4 or 5, but I'm going to at least have a few different harvests during my lifetime. And at that point, maybe I'll have kids, maybe I won't, but the money will come and then I can put it towards what I need to. And then the 93-year-old, he purchased various parcels for his great grandkids. And so he saw this from the perspective of, they're not even of the age right now where they know what I'm doing. But at some point in their life, when this teak comes to harvest, they may be going through a point in their life where they just really need the money, whether it's going to college or grad school or buying a house or a wedding. And then you have this cash there at hand at once. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the harvest and then also thinning, so you don't have to wait the full 25 years. But people, when they're looking at this opportunity, see it from that generational wealth perspective. And for those who don't have a family or any heirs that they want to leave this to, we have had a handful of people put it in the name of charitable foundations. So there are certainly options there as well, but we'll certainly dig into those.
The first time you were here with us, I learned from you that there are 2 optimal times to harvest teak trees.
Mm-hmm.
One is at 25 years and the other is at 60 years. But of course, like you said, you can go ahead and buy trees that already have 20 years of age to them so that you don't have to wait for that entire time. And, I think what's interesting, Rachel, when we talk about the long view and investor mindset, the older a person is, the more likely that person is to take the long view. But yet,
That's
unfortunately,
true.
the younger person, really, when the younger person takes that long view, it can benefit that younger person even more if you get that younger person thinking about that older view, that long-term view. And when you do take a long view with an asset like timber, teak specifically, I think what's interesting is the fact that it is a highly recession-resistant asset. Trees continue to grow regardless of what is going on. And now I'm paraphrasing the well-known investment advisor, Steve Sugarud here. He said that trees grow through recessions. Trees grow through wars. They grow through stock crashes. They grow through real estate crashes. They give you built-in investment growth that's nearly guaranteed nowhere else. That was a well-known investment advisor, Steve Sugarud, on timber investing.
It's very, very true. And we have a farm that's 20 years old at this point, another one that's 14 years old. And I can tell you, I can guarantee one thing for you. During 2008 to 2012, the trees continued to grow.
Right.
And what's really nice about timber and teak specifically is that as it grows every year, it just literally is growing in value. So if, let's say, when we're getting ready to harvest, there's no market for it, we decide to wait another year, wait another couple years, the trees aren't going to expire. They're not going to rot. If anything, they're just going to continue to grow. And what that means is it's producing more board feet so that when we bring it to the marketplace, you see a higher return. So it is a really, really neat product in that regard. And, I know that, Keith, you've been talking about the coronavirus the past couple of episodes. And, a lot of us are kind of hunkering down and just really uncertain about what's going on in the future. But at the same time, in our business, we've seen a lot more people inquiring because they realize the stock market isn't a guarantee. Yes, it was up 20% at one point and just really, really doing well. And that's the time when we want to take our money out and put it somewhere else. But at the same time, right now, a lot of people are realizing that you can't always count on the stock market. There's a lot of volatility there. And unless you're tracking it on a really regular basis, it's really, really difficult to do well from it if you're not necessarily always tracking what's going on. And the trees, they literally just grow. We have a fantastic management team who takes care of everything. You don't have to do anything if you don't want. We have had a couple of owners who've asked if they could come down during the harvest process, which of course you're more than welcome to do that. But out of sight, out of mind, and they're literally just growing. So 2008, 2012, the trees were growing during that recession, during everything that's going on right now with the coronavirus. The trees are still continuing to grow. So it's neat to see that it really is recession proof. They don't care what's going on in the market. They just are doing what they do best, which is growing.
Well, you brought up an interesting point that I think is lost on a lot of people. For example, to make another residential real estate analogy, if a person buys a fourplex, that fourplex doesn't grow 4 more doors and become an eightplex over a number of years. But with trees, not only can it increase in board foot value, but you would also have more board feet. So just to take a number out of absolutely nowhere, you might have $100 per board foot for a certain timber type. Over 1 year, say that increases to $110 per board foot. But not only do you have appreciation in the value, you have more of the asset as it grows at the same time in both size and value.
That's exactly right. And that's one of the reasons I think a lot of top investment strategists and economics are really bullish on ownership of timber, because it just continues to grow. Doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't rot, like I mentioned before, which I know is a concern for a lot of people when they're looking at risks of agriculture. But trees just continue to do their thing. And where we have our farms, it's prime. We have farms in Panama, also in Nicaragua, and they're 2 top locations in the agriculture market in terms of soil, the weather conditions. So it's exciting to see that regardless of what's going on, like we talked about and like we've been talking about for years, is that it doesn't matter what's going on in the economy, the trees are still growing.
Hey, Rachel, well, you mentioned where teak trees thrive. It has to do with things like rainfall and soil fertility. And teak trees are a pretty proud-looking tree. They can exceed 100 feet in height and 5 feet in diameter. But oftentimes, even within timber, you need to pick a certain type. You need to pick a durable type. You want a type that's had value and demand for quite a while. And teak trees have had value because their wood has these natural oils inside it that make teak resistant to both fire and termites. And therefore, that resistance helps you out both when the trees are growing. You want it to be resistant to fire and termites, and whatever product that teak is eventually turned into. It has that resistance to fire and termites as well. It really comes down to supply and demand. And I know just from dealing with you more, that teak is being harvested at 8 to 12 times the rate that it's being replanted.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I'm going to just take a step back for a moment. But one of the big reasons why teak is as valuable as it is because you just hit the nail on the head, because of how durable it is.
Yeah.
And because it is a real hardwood. So what that means is there's a lot of value to it because it lasts. And for investors, of course, going back to the risks and thinking about what those concerns may be, when you're looking at agricultural products, you really think about the termites and the fungus and the rot. But after age 3, teak becomes resistant to that. And then, of course, that carries on to the final product. So you're exactly right there, Keith. You've definitely done your research, but going back to the demand and the supply and the demand. So teak for a long, long time was being grown naturally. Myanmar, you might have heard of Burmese teak, now Myanmar, but there, India, Laos, Indonesia is where teak was growing naturally. And then those 4 countries realized that because there was so much value in these trees, they were being logged illegally. So they made it illegal to log these naturally growing trees. But as a result, what happened is more plantations started to pop up. And it's actually interesting because the plantation teak does have more value than the naturally growing teak, which actually in the long run really makes sense because plantation teak is growing with the intent to harvest it and sell it in the marketplace. So it's being managed properly. It's being maintained properly. Yes, you do have to do annual cleanings. You don't want any underbrush growing because that's taking away nutrients that the teak trees could have had. You don't want the branches growing out because you want the tree to be growing straight. You want the trunk straight, and you don't want any diversions from that straight wood. So there is maintenance and upkeep that is needed in the teak farms, but that means that it becomes more valuable. So it's interesting. I was in Panama, this was probably about 5 or 6 years ago at this point. We were looking for buyers for our thinnings. We do thinnings of the trees at age 12, 18, and 20. Okay. We sell those into the marketplace. So that's the good part, is that you don't have to wait a full 25 years before you start seeing anything come back, because we do this process called thinning. 12, 18, and 20 is when we remove the trees that aren't growing properly. and you sell them into the marketplace. And this is all built into the formula when you're figuring out how many trees to plant per hectare. So you anticipate the thinnings 12, 18, 20. The owners of the land, you as a teak investor would see those thinning proceeds come back to you. But what that does is it allows the teak trees that are growing well to have space to have the nutrients to continue growing. So when we were looking for a company to come and buy the thinnings from us for our, at this point, 20-year-old tree farm, we kept running into companies that were being represented for the Indians and the Chinese. And so as we were digging deeper and deeper into it, what we found is that the Indians and the Chinese are the two biggest consumers of teak. And of course, that makes sense. They have a ton of people there. There's a really big population, but ownership of teak products is seen as a social symbol to have teak products. It's used in a lot of construction there as well because it's very durable, but you'll see it in teak flooring, for example. You'll see it. I know a lady here in Belize who was building her house out of teak because it lasts. So because it is so durable and it lasts, you can put a high price tag on it. Now, what's really interesting, and if anybody wants a copy of a teak white paper, teak resource guide, just let us know. We'll be happy to send that over to you, and you'll see these charts that I'm going to reference. But in there, we have who the buyers are, who the consumers are of teak, and the Indian and the Chinese, as we just talked about. But what's also interesting is that those are the two countries that are projected to be the two most populous by 2100. The Chinese and the Indian projected to be the two most populous by 2100. So when we're looking at supply, we're looking at demand, who the buyers are, is there going to continue to be a demand from buyers? All the stars really align. And so we, of course, are very, very bullish on teak. We've purchased more farms. We're planting more teak. We have various, I think we totally have 5 farms, 2 in Nicaragua, 3 in Panama, because we understand that there's a real supply for it. And it's been really fascinating because we've been able to open up this timber market and this teak market to these average investors again. And when I say average, like I said before, not people who don't necessarily know what's going on in the marketplace, but people who don't have the monetary resources of $200 to $300, $400 million to invest in one project. So being able to offer this has been amazing. We've seen so many people who've really taken advantage of this opportunity because they understand the value of it. But that's what it all comes back to, is the value of the teak and where it stands in the marketplace today. What I think is really quite fascinating is it's not something that is a synthetic product. It wasn't built in a lab 2 years ago. It's not a fad. It's not a trend. It is a product that has been around for centuries. It was used on the Titanic, and we were joking about that a little bit before when we were catching up earlier, Keith, since we met on a cruise, and we were joking about, oh, maybe there was teak wood on the boats. But right. Titanic actually had teak chaise lounge chairs, and you can Google them. You can find them. I can send you pictures as well. But it's really quite fascinating because that teak chaise lounge chair that was found on the Titanic was brought up out of the water, refurbished a little bit, and now it's in a museum somewhere. But you can see that it's just so hard, it's so valuable, and continues to be used today. And of course, that's something when you're looking at a product is how long has it been around? How has it performed in the marketplace previously? And of course, with teak, it's like I said before, all the stars just align.
And it still has quite a bit of contemporaneous use. You were letting me know before on Wayfair where you can buy a number of teak products today, even a shower mat that you can put beneath your feet. And it's used in more, I suppose, distinguished applications like an expensive teak gate that you can get that encloses your home. So there really are a lot of modern day uses for teak as well. So this is an opportunity for you, an everyday investor that doesn't have the money of a Ted Turner or a John Malone in the multi-billions. You can own the land itself, the trees that grow on them, and it has professional management. And Rachel, was that right with the thinning proceeds? You don't need to wait for a complete harvest of the trees. Therefore, you can get some cash flow stream prior to maturity?
Yes, that's exactly right. So teak is a 25-year harvest cycle. I know it's a long timeline to think about, but because we do have these thinnings that happen periodically throughout that 25-year cycle, what happens is we cut down the trees that aren't growing properly, and there's still use for them, not as much use as there would be for big board feet, but there's still use for them. So we sell those into the marketplace, and then the owner of the parcel receives the returns from the profits of selling those thinnings. So it really is a great opportunity. You don't have to think in that 25-year time frame. Of course, that's when your big payout is. That's when you're going to see a bulk of your income come, but at least you don't have to wait that 25 years. And what's really great is because we do have various aged farms, there would be laddered payouts. 12, 18, 20, and then 25 is the big harvest. But because the trees are 20, 14, and newborn, if you think about that, and we have this lovely chart that you can look at, but when you think about it, there'd be payouts throughout the different years if you decide to become an owner at the various farms. So big opportunities there. You don't have to wait the full 25 years, which is a nice advantage, but the opportunity is there. To get in at older farms, more mature farms, actually the 20-year-old farm is going to be 21 this year in June. We have the 14-year-old and then the newborns. So a lot of opportunity just depending on what your timeline and your horizon for those investments look like.
We're going to learn more about what your ROI is projected to be and what the cost per parcel is. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Our guest is Rachel Jensen. We're talking about Teak investing. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Property investors can get killed with maintenance costs. That's less likely when you buy brand new construction. Let me tell you about JWB Real Estate Capital in bustling Jacksonville, Florida. They pioneered the build-to-rent model where you can invest in new construction, turnkey rental property. That's why JWB was featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. To learn more and see inventory, start now at newconstructionturnkey.com. The company that's provided our listeners with more loans than anyone is Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. You can finance more than 10 single families up to fourplexes. Serving most U.S. states, their knowledge and experience leads to your financial freedom. They're number one in the investment space. Pre-qualify and then chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. Start on your next investment property loan right now at ridgelendinggroup.com.
Hi, this is Russell Gray, co-host of the Real Estate Guys radio show, and you're listening to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Hey, you're back inside Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Rachel Jensen and I are talking about investing in timber. Warren Buffett said someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. And there's a Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. And interestingly, you talked about some of the ages in which you offer the trees. In Panama, you have parcels with mature trees growing on them that are 20 years old. You let us know that they're almost 21. You have what we call teenagers at age 14 or newborns, which are age 0, if you will. That's in Panama. And then in Nicaragua, you have newborns at age 0. Tell us more about what we can expect for ROI on these investments.
Depending on what time you come in is obviously going to depend on the price that you pay and then what the income looks like over that time period. So just to give you an example, we have the newborn teak in Panama and also in Nicaragua. This is newborn, newly planted, starting at $6,880 per parcel. So $6,880 a parcel plus the titling fees. The teenage teak, this is 14-year-old teak. It has 11 years until harvest, starts at about $16,000 plus titling fees. Now, when you look at the projected net income, well, let me take a step back. Because we do have various ages and some of them have already gone through the thinnings, you'll see that the projected net income varies depending on what age the teak is. So let me further explain that. With the newborn teak, you're starting at $6,880 and the projected net income looks to be about $94,000 over that 25-year cycle because you have the thinnings at age 12, 18, and 20. For the teenage teak, it's already 14 years old, so we've gone through that 12-year-old thinning. So the net projections look to be about $92,000 at this point because we have only a couple more thinnings at 18 and 20. Now, the one that I didn't talk about yet is the mature farm. It's 20 years old. At this point, going for $23,800 plus the titling fees, and the net projections are about $79,000. And that's because we've already seen the thinnings at age 12, 18, and 20. So what you're receiving at this point would be the harvest. And the harvest is in about 4 years at this point. Now, I do want to mention, because I know we did our last podcast about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit longer at this point, but we're still getting people who are inquiring after listening to that podcast. And I do want to mention that each year the teak tree values go up. And that's because as they're growing, they're literally growing in value. That parcel value is growing. in value. So you may be listening to this podcast 6 months after we record, a year after we record. So don't stay stuck on those prices right there. Obviously, the projected net profit will stay the same, but the parcel cost will go up because the parcel value is literally increasing as the trees are growing in value. So I do just want to mention that if anybody wants to get a copy of what the business plan looks like, of course, just complete your information and we'll get that over to you.
We're talking about a size of a 1/4 acre per parcel. Those are the sizes that you're talking about there. When it comes down to this, can you explain that some more? Like, for example, with this mature teak that's 20 years old, you said the cost per 1/4 acre parcel is $23,800. That's the most expensive one. The $79,000 return, what does that refer to?
So that refers to the final harvest at age 25. So that is the net number. That's after the management fees. That's after the harvest fees are taken out. That is the net number that somebody can expect to see back after that harvest at age 25. So the trees will be 21 in June, which is coming up actually in a few months here. They'll be 21 in June. And then at that year 25, they're looking at about $79,000, $80,000 as net profit.
Wow, that is a substantial return in just less than 5 years, a $23,800 plus title fee initial investment with $79K back.
That's exactly right. And there are the benefits to coming in at this point because we don't have that much longer until we harvest. But then you also look at the flip side of the coin where you're looking at the newborn farms where the entry is $6,880 plus the titling fees and the net projected profit is about $94,000. So you can see it's a lower entry for the newborn. Of course, that makes sense. The older trees, the 20-year-old trees are at this point $23,800. Because they're older, there's more value to them. So what's also neat is you own the trees and you own the land that the trees are on. You get title to it. So it's not one of those leases or anything along those lines. It is titled to how you want it to be titled, and then you own the trees. Now, one point I do want to make, and I don't think we talked about this in our previous conversation, is that this is a certified reforested farm. All of our farms are certified reforested. And in Panama, what that means is you don't have any property tax and you don't have any income tax in Panama because what we're doing at these farms is committing to replanting. So after this harvest, we are committing to replanting and doing it again and continuing that for generations. This is where that generational wealth stewardship comes in. In Nicaragua, we've worked with the forestry department there and we have made it official that there are going to be tax benefits for these certified reforested farms. And what we were able to get was an exoneration of taxes, and it's only 2% that would be taxed to the Nicaraguan government. So really excited about that as well. Previous to this, they didn't have any sort of perks or benefits. So it was a couple years of lobbying, but we finally got through that. So really excited, but you can see there are big benefits to committing to replanting and then just continuing on for generations.
Now, if you, the investor, want to know more about your ROI, there are different ages, like Rachel and I mentioned, mature at 20, teenage 14-year-old trees, and then newborns. You can go ahead and learn more about that in the report that we'll talk about in the end. But I know there's one other potential benefit, and it's not mandatory, but it's an option for those that invest in Panama teak. Tell us about the residency aspect, this sort of having plan B or providing an option to an investor.
Yes, and this is actually why our Teak program got started, because in 2013, a new decree came out stating that if you wanted to get permanent residency in Panama, there were 3 ways that you could do it. One was you can invest in land valued at $10,000 or more, you could set up an active business, or you could get employment. And so what we were doing at that point when we really started this was looking at the land that we had and what could we do in order to value it, to get it down to values of $10,000 or more for people to get their residency. But over time, what we realized is some people wanted residency, other people didn't. But for the folks who wanted residency, they really did it as a plan B, a backup, where they could just have something in their back pocket. If they decided they didn't want to live in their home country anymore, they were able to pull out this residency card and go live in Panama or go live in Nicaragua. Now, Panama definitely has the better residency. You only have to visit 1 day every 2 years to maintain it. You don't need to know Spanish to get the residency, and you can work when you're in country, and it can lead to a passport if that's your ultimate goal. But for example, I did the residency there about 4 or 5 years ago at this point with this Teak program specifically, because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, where I wanted to be. I live in Belize at this point. I was in Nicaragua for a while as well, but figured I might as well just get this residency in Panama because it is so easy. Put it in my back pocket. And now whenever I go to Panama, I go to the short line at immigration and it's easy peasy. And it also gives me a little bit more flexibility when it comes to figuring out where I want to live and where I want to spend sufficient amount of time, if any, in another country. So really great options there. I would recommend everybody taking a look at it. There's no disadvantage to having another residency, especially in Panama, where there really is no time requirement that you need to spend to maintain this residency. It's permanent. They suggest that you visit 1 day every 2 years in order to maintain it. But again, really easy peasy and just another benefit to the Teak program. We have about over 350 owners at this point in Panama. And I would say about half of them decided to go through the residency process or are going through the residency process now. And they were able to add on their spouse as a dependent, their kids up to 18 or 18 to 25 if they're enrolled in college. And they were also able to add their parents. So you could bring the whole family along, get your residency in Panama, keep that in your back pocket, let the trees continue to grow, and then just see where it brings you. But yes, it's a really nice benefit. I would recommend everybody taking a look at it. Even if you've never been to Panama, even if you have no intention of living in Panama, it's just a really great option. And I mean, we're seeing it today. It's such an uncertain world at this point where having options is probably a good idea.
Yeah, that interests a lot more people now than it did just a year ago, perhaps. And yeah, I know that you don't need to do anything specific to make renewals on your Panama residency card. We all think of freedom a bit differently. And hey, maybe one extra measure of freedom is having that Panama residency card. It doesn't do you much harm. So this investment has such an affordable entry point then for the newborn teak. A quarter acre would be just about $7,000 all the way up to the 20-year-old teak, $23,800. And of course, these are per parcel prices. You can buy several parcels if you like. Rachel, is there any last thing a prospective investor might want to know about this before I tell them about the report?
Good question. There are a couple. One of them is we get folks who are asking about if they can title it in the name of their kid or their grandkid or their niece or nephew or whoever they really want to leave it to. And the answer to that is yes. If they're under 18, then it's just their legal guardian who completes the paperwork for the titling. If they're 18 or over, then they would be the one that's completing the paperwork. But it's absolutely doable. And we've had a lot of folks who've liked the newborn option because it's under the gifting amount. So they don't have to pay any taxes on it. They're able to just gift it to whomever they want to, and then they can continue on from there. Another point that I do want to make is that you can use your self-directed IRA in Panama and Nicaragua. In Panama, it's a little bit more complicated. There are a couple of extra steps. You do have to set up a company that is solely owned by your self-directed IRA, and then you do need to register that company in Panama. So there are going to be extra expenses with that. But again, it is an option if you're looking to get your self-directed IRA to work. In Nicaragua, your custodian can be the one directly owning the parcel, so you don't have to worry about setting up an LLC or registering the corporation there. The custodian is able to be the legal entity for that. So that's always a great option. We've had a handful of people who've done it through their Roth, which is another really nice way to do it. But again, options just depending on what works for you. And then in addition to that, we do have payment schedules. If you're looking at 2 parcels or more, we do have payment schedules, 0% interest over a 6-month period. But I'm happy to talk to you about that more specifically if that's something you'd like to discover. And then, of course, one more thing. I always seem to have one more thing, Keith. But the big one is we are accepting Bitcoin. So you are able to use your Bitcoin if you'd like to pay for a parcel, the residency, the titling fees, all of that can be covered through cryptocurrency. So just something to bear in mind as well if you're looking to unload some of that Bitcoin.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I just love talking about this topic more than most. Maybe it's because I've always lived in northern climates, so going to these tropical places to look at these agricultural and timber investments just seems so exotic to me. But like we said, trees grow through recessions, trees grow through wars, trees grow through stock crashes. They grow through real estate crashes. And if you're interested in learning more, get the report at getricheducation.com/teak. That's getricheducation.com/TEAK. You'll get a lot of information on this, including the pro formas with the ROI projections and more for the age 0, age 14, and the 20-year-old teak.
And I also want to note that if for some reason you're not going through the specific link that Keith just mentioned, just let us know where you heard about us from, because there are special discounts that apply for the Get Rich Education listeners. So we do want to make sure we pass those on to you. So please just do make sure that you are mentioning it to us, or make it easy and go through the link directly. And from there, we'll be able to inform you about what the latest specials are.
And you also offer tours at times.
Yes, we do. So we like to do 2 to 3 tours per year. We're still confirming dates for this year. We had one earlier in January, and it's just a day. We go to the Darien province. We leave from Panama City, go to the Darien, come back. We typically do something the day before or the day after with the group. This past time we went on the Panama Canal, which was really quite neat. Went through 2 out of the 3 locks with the group. And then the following day we went over to the farm. But, it's nice because it is a hard asset. You're able to wrap around your arms around the trees and become a tree hugger, if you want to call it that. But it is a hard asset. You get to be boots on the ground, meet the team. You'll meet the management team. You'll meet me, my coworkers, and just have a really great time. And I think one of my favorite parts about the tours is that we're interacting with other like-minded individuals, because I understand. I was born in New York. My family, when I first moved to Nicaragua, I was wondering why I'd ever want to leave the great country of New York. Not even the state, the country of New York. And so, I was most certainly the black sheep of the family. And so when I was talking about these sort of opportunities with them, this is I don't know what you're talking about. Why would you ever want to leave the stock market or anything along those? It's just not safe. It's not secure. And so I understand what that feels like. So it's nice to be on these tours with folks who are like-minded, who understand this concept of diversification in countries and asset classes and timelines, and to be able to have these sort of similar conversations with each other. So you'll meet a lot of like-minded individuals, which I think is a really neat part of the trip. And of course, complete your due diligence.
Yeah, and I know many of your owners of teak parcels there never will come to Panama and never will see their teak parcels, but it's a cool option. I really encourage you, the listener, to go if you want to go. Besides seeing that, there are all the highlights of Panama City, tours of the canal. You can even go in the highlands, and then there are the beaches to enjoy on both the Caribbean side and the Pacific side of the nation of Panama there. So, Rachel, it's been really thrilling talking about this sort of stuff. Thanks so much for coming back onto the show.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Keith, for having me. Looking forward to hearing from everybody. Have a really great day.
Oh, yeah. Great stuff from Rachel. As always, I leave chats with Rachel every time feeling a little more energized than when we began talking. So I hope you get to meet her, or at least talk with her too. Yeah, if the Panama residency program option is something that interests you, there is an additional cost for that. But more core here is that understand that it is a turnkey investment for you. The management and the sale and everything of the teak is all handled for you. In fact, the same company and people, they're named Heyo Forestal, have been managing these same teak plantations for years. If this sounds at all interesting to you, I'd encourage you to learn more and at least get the Teak investment report to learn more and learn about the risks and rewards. I think that you'll be delighted to see Teak's ROI compared to the S&P 500 over time, the U.S. stock market. That was enlightening when I first learned about it. Rachel and I did have a few numbers flying around there because there are 3 different ages of the teak trees: newborn, 14-year-old teens, and 20-plus-year-old matures. Some pretty handsome projected returns. That 20-year-old teak, which is nearly 21 years of age now, with that $23,800 investment, when it gets to age 25 in just a few years, you're netting out $79,000. That's just over 4 years from today. And that's if you buy just one parcel. Buying 10 parcels, 10X's all of that. Then such a low entry point for the newborn, about $7,000 per quarter acre parcel, even a zero interest payment plan option. Yes, you own the trees and you own the land and title the land how you prefer. There are over 350 timber owners in Panama now. A number of those are you from hearing the show when we last had Rachel here with us in 2018. Most investors achieve a strong measure of diversification here. That is a big attraction to it. In one fell swoop, you become diversified both in a different nation and with a different asset type whose income is also derived from a different place. There's a good chance that it's uncorrelated with most anything else that you're in. And you might even view it as a great legacy for your heirs, or just a nice intermediate to long-term benefit for yourself. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, and I'll be back with you next week to help you build your wealth when we get contemporaneous on the economy again. Rachel mentioned that there is a discount for you, the Get Rich Education listener, when you request your exclusive investor report at getricheducation.com/Teak. Thanks, Rachel. That's getricheducation.com/TEAK. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.